All right, welcome back, warrior. We are now reading 3rd Nephi chapter 6. And we're so excited about this because we're moving right along. Okay. Chapter 6, the summary says, whoops. It's like I got to make sure that thing doesn't fall on me. All right. Sort of like I get marks on this all the time because it's broken. Okay. The Nephites prosper. Pride, wealth, and class distinctions arise. The church is rent with dissensions. Satan leads the people in open rebellion. Many prophets cry repentance and are slain. Their murderers conspire to take over the government. Great. That's the worst. Am I right? Okay. So, here we go. And it came to pass that the people of the Nephites did all return to their own lands. Hold on. Cannot see. Okay. In the 26th year, every man with his family, his flocks and his herds, his horses and his cattle, and all things whatsoever did belong unto them. And it came to pass that they had not eaten up all their provisions. Therefore they did take with them all that they had not devoured, of all their grain of every kind, and their gold and their silver and all their precious things. And they did return to their own lands and their possessions, both on the north and on the south, both on the land northward and on the land southward. And they granted unto those robbers who had entered into a covenant to keep the peace of the land, who were desirous to remain Lamanites, lands according to their numbers, that they might have with their labors wherewith to subsist upon, and thus they did establish peace in all the land. Okay, so now the people returned to their own lands. In verse 2, we learn that they had not eaten up of all their provisions, so they could use them, those provisions, as they were rebuilding and replanting. These verses are an excellent reminder to us about the importance of being sufficiently prepared. Their physical and spiritual preparation was at the heart of their strategy and why they were able to win the war. Here are some things that the prophets today have said about the importance of us being prepared. So we have Elder L. Tom Perry, October 1995, said, "The need for preparation is abundantly clear. The great blessing of being prepared gives us freedom from fear," end quote. Then President Spencer W. Kimball says, quote, "Speaking of preparation, President Kimball said, the Lord will not translate one's good hopes and desires and intentions into works. Each of us must do that for himself," end quote. Thank you for that reminder, President Kimball. Yeah, we actually have to do the work. It's not going to come out if we don't. And that's in the Miracle of Forgiveness, page 8. And then President Gordon B. Hinckley said, "The best storehouse is the family storeroom," end quote. Yes, that's where I go for my chocolate. Shh, don't tell anybody. President Gordon B. Hinckley, October 2005 General Conference. And then I really like this quote from President Monson. He says, when the time, wait, what is it? Hold on. Okay, so this is how I remember the quote, but I looked it up just because I was really curious to see if I was getting it right or not. So I remember it as, when the time to perform has come, the time to prepare has passed. Now, that is what I remember it as. But as I'm looking things up, it says that, quotes President Monson saying, when the time for decision arrives, the time for preparation has passed, or is past. And so I'm like, oh, I guess that makes sense too. But now I'm like, well, who said this then, you know? Because I'm like, that's what I was hoping. Okay, so I clicked on it a little bit more and I'm looking it up. And so President Monson, he said that when the time for decision arrives, the time for preparation is past. Okay, but then there's a different quote from Peter Vidmar, who was quoted. And no, I'm just kidding. That's not him. It's I don't know who it is. It doesn't even matter. But apparently somebody else said when the time to perform arrives, the time to prepare has passed. And that's what I feel like with the food or with the preparation. I guess not always food because there's lots of other things you could do to prepare. But that's what I think of. Like we can't prepare at the last minute because the time has now passed to prepare. Okay, verse 4. And they began to prosper and to wax great, and the 26th and 7th years passed away, and there was great order in the land. And they had formed their laws according to equity and justice. And now there was nothing in all the land to hinder the people from prospering continually, except they should fall into transgression. And now it was the Nope. And now it was Gidgiddoni and the judge Laconius and those who had been appointed leaders who had established this great peace in the land. And it came to pass that there were many cities built anew, and there were many old cities repaired. And there were many highways cast up and many roads made, which led from city to city and from land to land and from place to place. And thus passed away the 28th year, and the people had continual peace. Do you notice how much progress happens when everyone is keeping the commandments and they keep Christ at the center and they're doing those things that the prophets or their leaders are telling them? It's just like progress. They're just like able to progress so much and so fast. Because look, it says it came to pass there were many cities built anew, and there are many old cities repaired. Like that was not happening when people were living in fear, when people were making wicked choices, when they were in the pride cycle and all those things, right? So are you seeing this? Because that is something that I notice. And when I go to other places, like other countries or other cities, I'll look around like, why doesn't this place look so clean and so nice like other cities I've seen before? And it's like, oh, because they're in the thick of thin things, right? That's like another thing that I think President Monson said, or maybe is it Elder Holland? I don't know. But they're just in like not doing those things that could help them, not centering their lives on Christ, not keeping commandments, and just being in that pride cycle, thinking only of themselves. And yeah, I think that it's so important for us to see how that transpires in other people's communities so that we could see how it can make a difference in our community, right? Okay. So everybody was converted. So this is some commentary from the Redheaded Hostess. Says, everyone had been converted to the Lord. So there was space and great prosperity. There was peace and great prosperity. Also space. There was great order in the land, and they were building new cities and repairing old cities. Verse 8 explains, oh man, that many highways were cast up. I did sleep a lot. Were cast up and roads made. This is an interesting insight. If you do an internet search for the word Sakbeob, S-A-C-B-E-O-B, Sakbeob, you will find pictures of ancient Mayan roads. They were raised, paved roads that were built up, connecting important structures and cities. Oh, that's interesting. Okay, so verse 10. So this was the 28th year. But, oh no, this one starts with a but. Oh, we're going to need to drink some water for this. Don't do it. Don't do it, peeps. Number 10. But it came to pass in the 29th year, there began to be, what do you think there was? Some disputings among the people, and some were lifting up unto pride and boastings because of their exceedingly great riches, yea, even unto great persecutions. Come on, don't be a bully when you get money, right? Like they were probably helping to build the cities, and they maybe were real estate peeps or, business owners or, whoever. But now they were getting rich because people were using their services or businesses and whatever. And then they become the bullies. That's not cool. For there were many merchants in the land, and also many lawyers and many officers. See what I'm saying? And the people began to be distinguished by ranks according to their riches and their chances for learning. Yea, some were ignorant because of their poverty, and others did receive great learning because of their riches. Well, same as it is in these days, right? Some were lifted up in pride, and others were exceedingly humble. Some did return railing for railing, while others would receive railing and persecution and all manner of afflictions, and would not turn and revile again, but were humble and penitent before God. Which one are we? Verse 14, and thus there became a great inequality in all the land, insomuch that the church began to be broken up. Yea, insomuch that the 30th year the church was broken up in all the land, save it were among a few of the Lamanites, who were converted unto the true faith, and they would not depart from it. For they were firm and steadfast and immovable, willing with all diligence to keep the commandments of the Lord. Okay, is that us? Is that us? Are we going to be, what would we be? Would we be one of the few that would stay? Now the cause of this iniquity of the people was this: Satan had great power unto the stirring up of the people to do all manner of iniquity, and to the puffing them up with pride, tempting them to seek for power and authority and riches and the vain things of the world. Notice how he's not talking about how much they were building and experiencing growth. And thus Satan did lead away the hearts of the people to do all manner of iniquity. Therefore they had enjoyed peace but a few years. And that's sad, because it's like, oh, what do you do with your time now? Now we have so much time to just enjoy like what we did, and we're just wasting time. Now we just know how to be idle and waste time, because we're no longer building and we're no longer doing stuff. And now we're rich enough that we can not have to work as much, you know. Sad. Okay. And thus in the commencement of the 30th year, the people having been delivered up for the space of a long time to be carried about by the temptations of the devil whithersoever he desired to carry them, and to do whatsoever iniquity he desired they should. And thus in the commencement of this, the 30th year, they were in a state of awful wickedness. Already in a state of awful wickedness. And now they did not sin ignorantly, for they knew the will of God concerning them, for it had been taught unto them. Therefore they did willfully rebel against God. So that's worse than just not knowing. Okay. And now it was in the days of Laconius, the son of Laconius, for Laconius did fill the seat of his father and did govern the people that year. Okay, so now we're at Laconius Jr. Here's what it says from President Ezra Taft Benson. He says, pride fades our feelings of sonship to God and brotherhood to man. It separates and divides us by ranks, according to our riches and our chances for learning. Unity is impossible for a proud people, and unless we are one, we are not the Lord's. End quote. President Ezra Taft Benson, April 1989, General Conference. So just after only 3 years of being on their own and being blessed with prosperity, the pride started dividing the people, and they began to be distinguished by ranks. Separation, right? And that's what Satan tries to do. He tries to pit us against each other. And like with the betrayal trauma, like, I don't know if you've experienced this, but I did. And it was where I immediately thought every man was the worst, and every man must be watching pornography and betraying his wife and like that they can't make good choices. And then 2, that every woman was out to destroy my family. No, for real. Like, I'm only laughing because it's true. And like that, it's true that like, that's what I thought. Obviously it's not true what I was thinking, because those thoughts were from Satan and the adversary, because he wants me to think of my sisters as my enemies instead of as my friends and as my sisters who were in this, you know, fight together against Satan and not against each other, right? And I had this really, I had to work really hard to try and separate the two. Not only did I work hard to separate my husband from Satan, who was trying to destroy our family by his actions. Okay. But I also had to work on separating my sisters from Satan. I had to separate other women, my neighbors, my friends, I swear, like, I think I've told you before, the women here in Utah are all very attractive. And I'm just like, what is wrong? Why did I choose to live here? Anyway, but I had to work really hard to separate Satan from my sisters. So like, they are separate. Sisters are not trying to steal my husband away. And like, it takes work, like, to do that, to be able to separate the adversary from children of God. It takes work. And I can't say that I've overcome that, but I can say that it's a lot better. And going to church after D-Day was the worst. And it was like, oh, he's looking at all the women in here. And I'm so overwhelmed with the thoughts and the torture that the adversary was sending my way. And I just could not handle going to church because every single woman was like attractive, or like, I thought they were attractive enough for my husband that he's getting distracted from me and my family. And anyway, so I'm just like so overwhelmed by the torture that I couldn't even sit in church. Like, I couldn't listen. I couldn't enjoy it. I couldn't participate. And I mean, I'm not there anymore, and I'm so grateful. And in fact, thinking about that and reflecting upon that, and now thinking of where I'm at church, makes me feel like proud of myself. Like, oh, that was where I was, and I'm not there anymore. And it helps me know that there is progress, and that I thought for sure that was going to last forever. Like, I was like really concerned and worried, like, how am I going to come to church all the time? Like, how am I supposed to come to church with this happening? Right? Like, this torture, if it does not end, I'm not going to be able to come to church anymore. Like, literally, immediately I knew why certain women choose not to come, right? Like, why certain women just can't. And it's true, because the torture is so real. And if you're not aware of that torture that Satan is putting on you to have that enmity toward your sister instead of toward Satan, then you're not going to want to come to church, and it won't matter what is at church, because the torture is unbearable. Like you can't think, like, you can't, if you know, you know. You know what I'm talking about. And I'm sorry, because it's the worst. It's the worst place to be. As a daughter of God, it is the worst place to be. As a warrior sister, it is the worst place to be. Anyway, so I want you to know that I can totally relate. And that Satan pits us against each other all the time. Separation is the number one thing. In 3rd Nephi chapter, I think 10 or 11, when the Savior comes, he talks about how much he would have gathered us if we were willing, because that's his goal. Like 4 times he talks about it. And it's so crazy that the complete opposite is what Satan does. And you don't think of it. You don't realize until you like put it together. And so when the Lord is trying to gather us 4 times, he mentions it just in one, like, to the people, back to back. It's not even like 4 times throughout like all of scripture or whatever, but it's like back to back 4 times. And so it must be important. But Satan separates, okay? Satan separates us from each other, from the Lord, and then we can't get the help that we need, because when we're separate, who's going to help us? Who's going to strengthen us? Who's going to share their vulnerability with us and be able to relate and be able to know, like, we're not alone, right? That's the number one thing. It's like we think we're all alone, and then we realize that we're not all alone. And then that's when our healing can begin, when we realize that we are not alone. Why? Because Christ is with us. Why? Because our sisters are with us. Why? Because people actually do care about us and they love us, and Satan is telling us the complete opposite. Anyways, that's my little plug for unity. Right after President Benson's quote. Okay, so we have Laconius Jr. We're at Laconius Jr., okay? Verse 20. And there began to be men inspired from heaven and sent forth, standing among the people in all the land, preaching and testifying boldly of the sins and iniquities of the people, and testifying unto them concerning the redemption which the Lord would make for his people, for in other words, the resurrection of Christ. And they did testify boldly of his death and sufferings. So there were prophets, right? Verse 21, now there were many of the people who were exceedingly angry because of those who testified of these things. And those who were angry were chiefly the chief judges, and they who had been high priests and lawyers. Yea, all of those who were lawyers were angry with those who testified of these things. Okay, why? Because they're making them feel bad, right? Because those guys are making bad choices, and people don't like being told that they're making a bad choice and that they need to be better. Right? Like, it's just given. My kids don't like it. I don't like it. Everybody that's just like a natural human trait to not freely accept like criticism or feedback that's negative towards us, right? And so, because it makes us feel bad anyways. So, and of course, Satan plays off that and helps us to feel worse when they say stuff like that, because then we can be more angry. All right. And then it says, verse 22, now there was no lawyer, nor judge, nor high priest that could have power to condemn anyone to death, save their condemnation was signed by the governor of the land. Now there were many of those who testified of the things pertaining to Christ, who testified boldly, who were taken and put to death secretly by the judges, that the knowledge of their death came not unto the governor of the land until after their death. That's sad. Also, my hair is like, I feel like it's kind of like tipping me over. Now, behold, this was contrary to the laws of the land, that any man should be put to death except they had power from the governor of the land. Therefore, a complaint came up unto the land of Zarahemla, to the governor of the land, against these judges who had condemned the prophets of the Lord unto death, not according to the law. Now it came to pass that they were, why do people always want to kill the prophets, you know? Now it came to pass that they were taken and brought up before the judge to be judged of the crime which they had done according to the law which had been given by the people. Now it came to pass that those judges had many friends and kindreds, and the remainder, yea, even almost all the lawyers and the high priests did gather themselves together to unite with the kindreds of those judges who were to be tried according to the law. Okay, first of all, you guys, you probably know like President Nelson and all these prophets who have been called, and sometimes we think of them and we think like, man, we love them so much, you know, but then we gotta remember that there's people out there like these guys that hate them, and not just hate them, but that their lives are literally at stake because they accepted the call to be a prophet. So like, when we might think, hey, the prophet has it so good, you know, must be nice talking to Jesus, but like, no, like it's got to be nice, but also it's got to be the worst, right? Because now they've read the scriptures definitely more than I have, and can sense like, dude, but if you're going to call me to be a prophet, I'm now all of a sudden everybody's target for death. What? Like, so it has to be something that they are not aspiring to, because who would want to aspire to be a prophet who gets killed, stoned, imprisoned, or whatever, right? Like, I feel like these days everybody must think like, oh, I want to be the prophet, how nice, you know, and blah blah blah, or they aspire to certain callings. It's like, I do not aspire to stuff. Like, I don't want to be hated, and I don't want to be persecuted the way that prophets are, and I don't want all these things, and somehow we think that they must have wanted this upon themselves. And anyway, it just kind of goes to remind me, like, the prophet did not try to be the prophet the whole time. He was not like, my goal is to be the prophet, and that's my goal, right? Like, they don't aspire to those things like that. I think there's a difference between aspiring to have a relationship with Jesus Christ in a way that is better than the one you had yesterday. Okay. And then there's a difference between, hey, I want to be the prophet, right? So anyway, just like remember that the prophet did not choose to be the prophet. And if he got a choice, he probably would maybe opt to not to be the prophet so that he wouldn't be so persecuted by the haters, right? Like, I wonder how many times they feel like they could have died. So many, I bet. Okay, but hopefully nobody's really doing that. Nobody's seeking to destroy our prophets because they're so old and cute. Like, no, like, stop playing. Don't mess with those guys, okay? And anyway, so it says, now it came to pass that those judges had many friends and kindreds. Oh yeah, I read that. And so they were tried according to, okay. So we're on verse 28. But, I have a little bit of phlegm in there. Okay, so just as Christ was a threat to the high priests, lawyers, and judges to the Holy Land, these prophets were considered enemies to chief judges, high priests, and lawyers in this part of the world. In both places, Satan was using men with power and influence to destroy those who could help save souls, right? Satan, the worst. Okay, verse 28. And they did enter into a covenant one with another, yea, even into that covenant which was given by them of old, which covenant was given and administered by the devil to combine against all righteousness. Therefore, they did combine against the people of the Lord and enter into a covenant to destroy them. These are secret combos. And to deliver those who were guilty of murder from the grasp of justice, which was about to be administered according to the law. And they did set at defiance the law and the rights of their country. And they did covenant one with another to destroy the governor and to establish a king over the land, that the land should no more be at liberty, but should be subject unto kings. Like, they just don't learn, do they? Even the wicked people should remember when we were wicked and we wanted to have a king, and then 20 different people died because they were the son of the king and his brother, and the brother wanted to kill the other brother because they wanted to be the king, and then they got killed. Anyway, like, we know what King Benjamin said is right. Like, if there's a king, it's not a good idea. And it's sad that they just don't get it, right? Okay, here's the question. This group may be small now, but how might it grow? Why would it want to grow, right? This secret combination. And what caused this secret combination to arise? What were their goals? Okay, so here's the read it, live it. We're going to read for chapter 6. Can you see it? So it says, some people are stirred up in iniquity and puffed up with pride. Others are inspired from heaven and sent forth to preach and testify boldly. Be inspired, right? Like, that's where the progress is. That is where God is. That is where growth is. That is where joy is, to be inspired. Because what kind of attitude, what kind of like mood are you going to be in if you're always stirring up iniquity? Not the best mood. You know what I mean? That can't be healthy for my body to be in that mode all the time. Puffed up with pride. Yeah. No thanks. Because you're just pretending. You're just pretending. Anyway. All right. That was 3rd Nephi chapter 6. Until 3rd Nephi chapter 7, stay strong, warrior, and be inspired.